Every quartz rock out here has a very specific spirit to it. The plant, before you go out and you take a plant out of the ground, or you grind it, or you take acorns off the oak trees, there's a whole prayer, there's a whole reverence that goes to that, because while they're put here, they're not put here just for you. Spirituality is very deep and embedded. It is not inseparable.
In order for a person to be at their strongest, they had to be physically strong, they had to mentally take care of themselves, and they had to physically and mentally put their emotions into becoming spiritually strong.
The story about initial contact is actually a story about initial invasion. And it's important to understand that the Christian Europeans who came by ship and overland to the Americas actually had an ideology that they carried with them. They didn't simply bring various forms of technology on their ships, but they also carried a way of thinking. And that way of thinking had to do with a right, a divine right in their view, to go forth to lands that had not yet been discovered by Christians and to place those lands under a form of Christian dominion, or as I refer to it, as Christian domination.
For the Spanish, they knew that there was no way they can control San Diego. A big myth is that when the missions came here to San Diego, that the Kumeyaay were so thankful and that they had been so behind the world in culture and education that these Spanish people somehow came here and liberated them. And the truth is that this Kumeyaay people had a culture that was thousands of years old. They already had government systems that were in place that they were able to live peaceful existences. They had a culture that they respected and they enjoyed, a way of life and a means of living in this land that they were succeeding, they were thriving.
And I still hear people talk about the Spaniards building the missions. No Spaniard ever made an adobe block that I know of. They were all made by the Kumeyaay. No Spaniard built Padre Dam in Mission Trails Regional Park. That was built by Kumeyaay people. The trails that every explorer followed, all those great intrepid explorers, they always had an Indian in front of them, or they were already on an Indian trail. So the only people who were lost were the Europeans. The Indians were never lost. So I don't know how one could say they discovered San Diego.
California history didn't start with the missions, and Indian history didn't end with the missions. But that's the impression you get when you look at the way history has been taught in California in the school system. Of course, when they have the missions, they have to have somebody to be missionaries too, so it's almost like they're forced to acknowledge the fact that there were Indians that lived here.
If the history, the human history of San Diego County is 1 hour, the Europeans have been here half a minute. So we have been here half a minute. All the rest of that was Native American, and yet when you pick up a textbook, when you hear a lecture somewhere, it's always about those later people. It's about us. It's about the Spaniards. It's about the Mexicans. It's about mission-style architecture, Balboa Park. And so when you look at it in the time frame of minutes to years, we haven't been here a great deal.
The reaction of the Kumeyaay people to this onslaught of the mission system throughout California, but specifically in the Kumeyaay territory, was well illustrated by the burning of the San Diego Mission de Ocala by the Kumeyaay people in 1775. And in November of that year, numerous bands of the Kumeyaay Nation came together and burned the mission to the ground, and the priest was killed. That was a very strong statement as to how the Kumeyaay felt about the tremendous loss of life. There was a very high death rate among the people in the mission systems. I believe that the statistic was that your lifespan was about 6 years once you entered into that mission system.
I think one of the reasons the Kumeyaay have done so well as a culture is when the Spaniards came in, they adapted. They said, okay, you're going to make us